They carried them past theaters and beer halls and shooting galleries, through streets lit with new electric lamps, and placed them behind glass where anyone with a few coins could stand and watch them die or survive. The signs outside used the language of progress and wonder. Inside, the only sound that mattered was the thin mechanical hiss of air and the faint rasp of lungs that were not supposed to be working at all. Doctors in respected hospitals had already told most of these parents the same thing. The baby is too small. Nature will decide. There is nothing more we can do. Around the corner, a man who many of those doctors called a quack invited strangers to pay admission to watch those same hopeless infants breathing in carefully heated glass boxes. If this sounds like a freak show, that is because that is exactly how it was advertised. What the posters did not say is that for a crucial window of decades, the freak show was the safest place in the Western world to be born too early. The story usually begins at Coney Island, in the glare of the American boardwalk. But to understand why dying babies ended up behind glass in the first place, you have to start in Paris, in winter. February 1896. Paris. A 22-year-old secretary named Alice walks down Boulevard Poissonnière on her way toward the cabarets of Montmartre. She stops, not at a nightclub, but in front of a storefront she has never noticed before. The windows are bright. Behind them are rows of glass and metal boxes. Inside those boxes are premature babies, some so small a man could almost close his hand around their torsos. Their skin is translucent. Their chests move like thin paper in a draft. They are lying in machines modeled after chicken incubators, because that is exactly what they are. The engineer behind this display is a Frenchman named Alexandre Lion. In 1889, he patents an apparatus he calls an incubator for premature infants, borrowing the design and even the terminology from poultry equipment. He does something else that respectable physicians of his era consider outrageous. He funds the entire operation by charging the public admission to come look at the babies. In the first year, roughly 50,000 visitors walk through that room to watch strangers' children fight for their lives. For the parents who bring their babies there, this is not entertainment. It is the only option left. In late 19th century France and much of the rest of Europe, premature infants in ordinary hospitals are often set aside in unheated rooms, wrapped in blankets, and left to declare themselves one way or another. Artificial warmth is seen as unnecessary or even harmful. Specialized nursing care is rare. Many doctors openly say that trying to save these babies is futile. Lion's machines change something basic. They control temperature and humidity, shield the infants from drafts, and allow constant observation. They are not magic. They are simple physics applied to fragile lungs and underdeveloped skin, but they are expensive to build and maintain. Hospitals will not buy them. Charities cannot cover the cost. So Lion turns his ward into a hybrid space, part clinic, part exhibition. Posters go up in Paris. An Art Nouveau nurse holding infants. Vines sprouting baby faces instead of flowers. Children depicted as botanical specimens. The metaphor is delicate, almost whimsical. The business model is not. Every ticket sold buys a few more hours of heat and nursing for the children behind the glass. The pattern he establishes, life-saving care paid for by spectators, will define the next 40 years of premature infant medicine. And one of the people who walks through his exhibit will carry its imagery into another new technology, motion pictures. Alice Guy, the secretary who stopped at that storefront, will later become Alice Guy Blaché, one of the first narrative filmmakers in history. A few months after visiting Lion's incubators, she directs a short film about a fairy who walks into a garden, reaches behind oversized cabbages, and pulls out fully formed babies. It is not an accident that the oldest surviving narrative film we have is about infants harvested from plants. She had seen the real version first, children displayed like specimens, arranged in rows of glass boxes for adults to inspect. By the time that film is made around 1900, the incubator exhibit model has already started to spread. At World's Fairs in Berlin, Buffalo, and other cities, pavilions labeled with phrases like infant incubators and child hatchery invite visitors to witness modern technology, saving those whom nature would otherwise discard. The German term Kinderbrutanstalt, literally child hatchery, is not a nickname invented by critics. It appears in official descriptions of the Berlin exhibit. The language that once belonged to farmyards quietly crosses over into human medicine. From the outside, these shows look like the rest of the fairground. Banners, ticket booths, crowds flowing in and out. Inside, the experience is different. Nurses in crisp uniforms move between glass chambers, adjusting valves and checking thermometers. Doctors show off charts of survival rates and weight gain. Parents stand at the rail, separated from their own children by panes of glass and a barrier of public curiosity. For many visitors, it is a novelty, something to tell friends about. We saw babies so small they fit on a hand, sleeping in machines that keep them warm. For the mothers and fathers who have been turned away from hospitals or told their children are doomed, it is the only place that feels like a fight instead of a vigil. If the story stayed in exhibition halls, if incubators had remained a fairground oddity, this would just be another chapter in the history of strange attractions. But in the early 1900s, one man takes Lion's idea and builds an entire medical career on what polite society insists on calling a sideshow. His name is Martin Couney, or at least that is the name on his advertisements and later on his obituaries. His early life is hazy, complicated by his own habit of embellishing his credentials. For years he claims to have studied under Pierre Boudin, the French pediatrician who helped pioneer incubator use in Paris. Historians who have gone back through university archives and hospital records have not found any solid proof that Couney formally trained under Boudin, though they have documented that he worked around real incubator exhibits in Europe before coming to the United States. Whatever his exact medical education, by the late 1890s Couney has learned two hard truths. Incubators save a significant percentage of premature infants, and most hospitals want nothing to do with them. It is not just skepticism, it is ideology. In an era shaped by eugenic thinking, some doctors publicly argue that premature babies are weaklings who should not be kept alive at all. Articles in respected journals question whether saving such children is worthwhile, and some public health advocates frame high infant mortality as a kind of natural selection. Faced with this, Couney chooses a stage that traditional physicians consider beneath them, the midway. He takes incubators to major expositions in the United States, including the 1898 Trans-Mississippi Exposition in Omaha and the 1901 Pan-American Exposition in Buffalo, and sets up pavilions where visitors can pay to see live babies in incubators. Then, in 1903, he opens something even more audacious, a permanent infant incubator exhibit at Coney Island. Coney Island in the early 20th century is a collision of noise and light and water. Roller coasters plunge toward the Atlantic, electric bulbs trace out towers and arches, barkers shout in front of freak shows and dance halls. Amid all this stands a simple building with a sign that reads, "Infant Incubators, all the world loves a baby." Inside, rows of incubators line the walls. Some hold infants wrapped in cloth, their faces barely visible, their limbs thin as the tubes that feed them. Others are empty, cleaned and waiting. Nurses in white uniforms move, with the same brisk efficiency you would expect in any hospital ward. A doctor is often present to explain the machinery to visitors, pointing to gauges and explaining how warm air circulates through pipes to maintain a constant environment. The price of admission is 25 cents. Parents, however, do not pay. Couney's model is ruthless in its logic. The crowd funds the care. The more people who are willing to pay to look, the more nurses he can hire, the more incubators he can run, and the more babies he can accept. The ethical discomfort is obvious. To save their premature children, mothers and fathers must agree implicitly if not formally, that those children will be put on display. They will be watched not just by nurses and doctors, but by tourists who come in off the boardwalk smelling of salt and fried food. They will be pointed at. They will be fodder for stories told in hotel dining rooms and on train rides home. And yet, when you look at what mainstream medicine is offering, the same families at the same time, the choice many of them make becomes easier to understand. Hospital wards often lack incubators entirely. Where they exist, they may be used sporadically or abandoned when funding runs out or when staff lose interest. Some doctors continue to advise that premature infants are best left undisturbed in ordinary cribs or placed in open beds near stoves, without any serious monitoring. Cooney's exhibit is not perfect, but it is systematic. The babies he accepts, often referred by desperate physicians or by word of mouth among immigrant communities, receive continuous care. Wet nurses or nursing staff feed them on strict schedules because commercial formula at the time is unreliable and sometimes deadly. Temperature and hygiene are monitored obsessively. Survival statistics from his operations, reconstructed decades later from press reports and surviving records, suggest that he saved thousands of children who would likely have died elsewhere. One of those children is named Lucille Horn. In 1920, she is born prematurely on Long Island. The attending doctor tells her father there is no hope, that the baby is too small and will not live. Her father has heard of the Coney Island incubator exhibit. He wraps Lucille in a blanket, leaves the hospital against medical advice, and takes her on a train and then a streetcar to the boardwalk. He carries her through crowds of people out for a day at the seaside and walks through the door marked Infant Incubators. Inside, staff take the baby from his arms and place her in one of the glass boxes. For the next several weeks, she is kept warm, monitored, and fed while strangers pay quarters to walk past and stare. Decades later, as a 95-year-old woman, she will tell reporters that she owes her life to that sideshow and to the man who ran it. Stories like hers are not outliers. A modern neonatologist looking back at Cooney's operation in Coney Island and at similar exhibitions in Chicago and Atlantic City sees something astonishing: survival rates that compare favorably with those in many hospitals of the same era. For 4 decades, the safest place for a premature baby in parts of America is not a university hospital, but an amusement park. From the perspective of early 21st century medicine, this is almost unbearable. We like our progress in straight lines: discovery, adoption, standardization. Incubator babies disrupt that story. The machines exist. The method works. But the institutions designed to deliver care refuse, on moral and scientific grounds, to use it. A man they consider a charlatan uses it instead, and in doing so, writes a hidden chapter of neonatology in the language of the Midway. Outside the exhibits, the culture constructs a softer story to hide what is actually happening to vulnerable children in the same decades. Postcards show babies growing in cabbage patches tended by gardeners and fairies. Toys and advertisements depict infants as objects to be selected, adopted, and delivered, with no mention of abandoned foundlings, orphan trains, or anonymous incubator wards funded by ticket sales. Inside the exhibit halls, the truth is harder, stranger, and more precise. They displayed dying babies behind glass, and thousands paid to watch them breathe. The question is not whether that happened. The records are clear. The question is what it says about a civilization when the only way to save its most fragile children is to turn their survival into a show.